This week on Performance Anxiety, bassist to the stars Abby Travis becomes a Sumo princess. We dance with Spinal Tap, and dogs are rescued. Follow Sumo Princess on Instagram at sumo_princess_band. Listen to Abby's podcast, Sounds Off with Abby Travis, and follow them on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us at PerformanceANX on both Twitter and Instagram, and buy things at performanceanx.threadless.com. Enjoy Abby Travis.
Hello, this is Abby Travis. So wait, let me try that again. Hello, this is Abby Travis from Sumo Princess and Sounds Off with Abby Travis. And I'm thrilled today to be a guest on Performance Anxiety.
So we had a whole bunch of snow here, so it's just...
Where are you? Where are you located?
I'm in Virginia. I live a little bit outside of D.C.
Oh, where? My mom used to live in Alexandria.
Oh, I live in Winchester, so I'm about 90 minutes almost due west.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, you just go over the mountains, and that's where we're at. So you hit Route 7, and she'll know this. You hit Route 7 west and go straight out towards West Virginia, and before you hit West Virginia, you'll hit Winchester.
Well, I probably drove... Oh, that's where Patsy Cline's...
Yes.
The Rainbow Bar and Grill.
Yes.
I've totally been there.
Oh, cool. That's
That
awesome.
is a really amazing fucking shit kicker bar, man. That's a badass spot. Yeah.
I love this town. This town is amazing. It's so nice.
Because my mom had a place in Charlestown, West Virginia.
Yeah, and there's two. There's Charlestown and there's Charleston. Only West Virginia can do that, by the way.
Yeah, but she was in Charlestown because she used to work in D.C., so that was kind of like where, like they would go on the weekends, or then they kind of retired out there and stuff. So.
Yeah. So I'm not that far. You're probably pretty familiar with the area then.
Vaguely familiar. Yes, but I really enjoyed I think I went to the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which is totally not the same as the one in L.A.
No.
This one here, but it was pretty good.
I don't even know if the Rainbow's still around here. I'm not trying to think of where it would be, because so many places have just changed over the past couple of decades, but they love their Patsy Cline out here, that's for sure.
Well, who doesn't? If you don't love Patsy Cline, you're missing out. As far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny because I grew up in between Virginia and New Jersey a lot, and so my dad was a huge Patsy Cline fan, and I'm not even originally from the Winchester area, and so I grew up listening to Patsy Cline, and then lived in Alabama for a number of years, where met my wife and got married, had our kids, and then ended up moving right back up to here for work. So
there you have it.
Yeah. So and just Patsy Cline is all over the place around here. There's museums, her house is a historic area. There's they got to keep an eye on her tomb here.
Oh wow!
Yeah, people come and visit all the time. It's pretty wild.
Well, she did have one of the great American voices.
For sure. So thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it. The one thing that I wanted to talk to you about the most, because this is one of my favorite things of all time, is you ended up touring with Spinal Tap.
Well, I didn't exactly tour with them, but I did get to perform with them on 2 occasions.
Oh, you got to tell me about that, because Spinal Tap is one of the movies that just, if it's on, I watch it. I've bought it in every format available. I watch it all the time, and it's one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time.
Well, how that happened was when I was in college, so I think I must have been about 18 or maybe 19, my friend contacted me, and she had noticed that there was an ad in a magazine that said, with the Spinal Tap logo, and it said, wanted new, we need a new drummer. Our previous drummers have died, and that they were having auditions at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. And she was like, "I don't know if you're interested in this." Oh, well, no, I wasn't in college. I was in music school. I remember, so I think I was maybe a year or two. I might have been 20 or 21 or something. And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to do that." And so my boyfriend at the time was a drummer because I'm not much of a drummer.
Okay.
Hold on, God, why are people calling me right now? Go away.
Because they know we're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember because we went to the same music school together, and we were in this I practiced because the audition song was. I don't remember if it was Tonight I Want to Rock You Tonight. It was one with like a big drum solo in it. I don't recall which song it was, but we practiced and he like totally tutored me. And I remember this was like a jazz school that I went to, and all the people were like, so like, what the fuck are you guys doing? He was like, go away, go away. So he gave me like, he kind of like, I mean, I had played drums before, but I don't think anyone would like, hire me to be a drummer, unless they like the sound of a homeless person being thrown down several flights of stairs, with a lot of loose change in their pocket. That's my style. So I learned how, I drilled the song, I woodshutted the song, and then I had this other friend that worked at one of the big costume houses here in LA, like a costume rental place.
Okay.
So I put together this fairy costume. And I had this whole shtick. So I went down to the Coliseum and they just made everyone stand in line because it was a publicity stunt. And and so they were only going to let the first 50 people in, Right. And I was like not one of the first 50 people in, but I kept sort of like every time they went by or like I would talk, I had this whole shtick where my name was Promethea Pendragon and I was from a little town outside of Stonehenge and I'd been in these bands like the Celestial Seasonings, and I had like this whole shtick that like I just kind of created because I was such a big fan of the movie. And so then like I'm waiting in line and I hear like over one of the walkie-talkies like, bring in Tinkerbell. So they knew that I was gonna be like, good cop, and I totally made it like all over the news and like MTV and stuff. Like I know that,
oh wow,
one of my dad's friends called him like at 6 a.m, and he was like, Larry, your daughter's on CNN in a fairy costume. It's fucking hilarious. Like, so they called me up, so what happened actually during the actual song where I got to play, that was like the first time I played at the Coliseum. Yeah. They had a double kick drum pedal, which I was not prepared for. You know what I mean? So I gave it my best shot, but I don't think that I was quite what they were looking for on drums. But the management had called me and they were like, the guys would like you to be in the show, but not as the drummer, but like as a fairy. And I'm like, awesome. So they played at what was then called the Universal Amphitheater, but now I don't even think it's there anymore. I think it's the Harry Potter world. Oh, geez. Now, like it was the Universal Amphitheater and then it was the Gibson Amphitheater and now it's Hogwarts. That's which pretty much like, there you have it. So I go down, this whole story is actually pretty funny. So I go down to sound check and I have no idea like what's going to happen or anything. And I have my fairy outfit with me and I'm like sitting in the green room. God, let me try and remember all this because the whole thing was totally like life imitates art, where I'm sitting in the green room and it's like Jennifer Batten. Remember that woman that had the crazy hairdo that played guitar in Michael Jackson's band? Oh, yeah. So she was there, like they had like guest people that were playing, and then the drummer part was Gina and Debbie Peterson from the Go-Gos and Debbie Peterson from the Bangles.
Oh wow, that's fortuitous.
Yeah, I know, and also weird, like like sort of harbinger, like some sort of prophetic weird thing there.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of little people. And me, and it just, and I don't remember who else. And so we're sitting in first I go up, I don't remember what order this happened, but at one point I go up there and they're like sound checking, and the guys are not, all of them are completely in character all the time, although I believe Nigel was always Nigel. He was just full method Nigel, you know what I mean? Right. But and so like So Michael McKean's all like, Promethea, what would you like to do? And I was like, Stonehenge, like I didn't know, so I was like, yeah, I'll do that, in my fairy costume.
Yeah, why not?
So then, but then later, I guess, I don't know which happened first, one or the other, but I'm sitting in the green room with all those people. Someone comes in and the drummer, this is real life, had fallen off of the drum riser and broken his ankle. And people... It fucking totally happened. And so people are totally like, are you, of course, like half the people are freaking out. The other half of people are laughing their asses off, So they wound up getting, I think, like Chad Wackerman, like one of those guys that like had played with Zappa, like one of those super, session, like I can, those guys.
Oh yeah.
That like just basically played their whole set with no rehearsal whatsoever.
And can do it well.
Yeah. And no, I was, but so then during the show, I got to go out there. They had the giant Stonehenge that came down from the ceiling, and there was the two little people that were dressed in, I believe, like druid outfits. And I went out and did this, like my best sort of like Erte inspired like ballet for the audience, which was like really super duper fun, and I got a huge kick out of it. So then they're like, you should like come with us. Like, why don't you go to Phoenix with us? And I was like, oh man, I can't. I have like finals at music school or whatever, Oh gosh. So then I go back, which was, stupid thing to fucking say. So I go home, and at that point in time, my brother actually lived next door to me, and he was working on I don't know, he was like editing something with Dave Markey, and they were like, Dave Markey had been to the show. I think both of them might have been to the show. And I told them that I had been invited to go to like Phoenix, and they're like, what the fuck is your problem? Go back there and tell them that you'll go. And I'm like, you're right, I'm being a complete loser. So I drove all the way back to the Universal Amphitheater and somehow got, like, I don't even know how the hell I got to the loading docks.
Oh god.
But then there was like some giant, like some mean roadie who's totally just doing his job and probably thought I was some weird groupie or something, and he wouldn't let me back there. And so, but I'm like, but I'm the fairy.
I'm Promethea.
And he was like, whatever, lady, So then, but this is what's so fucking weird. So then, like, I knew that my friend, this friend of mine who lives in Seattle, her friend had shacked up with the drummer that had broken his ankle. I knew this somehow. So I call and somehow found out, this is so Pamela DeBar, by the way. Yeah. So I called and somehow found out, like, what plane they were going to be on.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I wish I had the stones to do stuff like this with my own real career, but I just,
yeah, me too.
Like, this is the only time I've ever been this insane, but it was like all for Spinal Tap, which maybe is somehow symbolic. I don't know, So I found out what plane they were on, and then just got, like, at that point, like you get a plane ticket to Phoenix for like $60 or something, like from LA. So I just went and got on the plane, and like they're all in first class, and I walk by and I'm like, hey guys, and they're like looking at me like that's weird, like, oh hi, so then we all. So then we get off the plane, and then I was going to stay with my friends in the Meat Puppets who live in Arizona. Those guys are my old friends, so I knew I had a free place to stay or whatever. But so we go they were all staying at like the Ritz-Carlton in like Scottsdale or whatever, and we have this lunch that's in like this huge dining room. Everything was so cinematic, like. But no one else is in the dining room. It's just a fairly long table with, Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, and
Harry Shearer.
And Harry Shearer, hi, sorry, and Harry Shearer, who, by the way, totally had that hair all the time. Like,
really?
That hair, yeah. Oh. And then like I think like a few other people. And just, it was, I was pretty young, and those guys were all smart and a lot older than I am, and really, really funny. So I was very blown away just to get to sort of listen to them talk and how funny they were. And I remember Christopher Guest like talking about like Jackie Gleason for a really long time, and I was just mostly just kept my mouth shut and was just kind of soaking it in because I mean, it was really cool.
Well, yeah, Spinal Tap.
Yeah, but at that point, I think no one was in character at the lunch. They were just kind of, and I shouldn't say this. I'm probably fucking like doing something wrong, or I don't know. So then we get to.
I don't know if they're listening.
We get to the venue, which is, I believe, the Mesa Amphitheater in Phoenix.
Okay.
And I, of course, immediately, like, twist the fuck out of my ankle on, like, some tire rut getting out of the bus. So it's like, totally, I'm like, you guys are cursed, whatever.
No kidding.
And then it's time for the show. And because I think the Little People were union, like they didn't have them for every show on the tour. I think they probably just had those guys for like LA and New York and like the big shows. And furthermore, the way the Mesa Amphitheater was, they didn't have, it's outdoor, so they didn't have the kind of rigging to be able to bring down the giant Stonehenge. So they did it like in the movie where there was the sort of inadequate little Stonehenge. So I go out there to do. Oh, and also at some point, maybe at the lunch, they're like, "Who are you? Like, what do you do? Like, what?" And so I explain that I'm a bass player, and they're like, "Well, you'll have to join us on Big Bottom." And I'm like, "I would like to do that." And so, of course, they put me on like the Ernie Ball Earthwood bass. Those they look like acoustic guitars that are just bigger because they thought it went well with my look.
Oh God, yeah, as a fairy with the acoustic guitar, I could see that.
Yeah, no, I understand. And so first I go out and I do my ballet, and I don't know why, but this is like my. Like something I don't know. I'll just tell what happened. So I don't know why I decided to improvise at the end of my ballet, which was all improvised anyways. I decided to do this completely over the top, bad acting, sort of like Gilligan's Island doing Shakespeare death.
Oh.
And so the guys in the band come over to me and they're trying to bring me back to life with the power of electric guitar. So like David St. Humbug's would go, and like I would lift up like a hip and a leg, but then I would fall back down and die. And none of this was planned at all. And then then Nigel would go doodly 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 doo, and I'd lift up something else and I would die. And then without missing a beat, Nigel Tufnell goes up to the mic and goes, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, the fairy has died, but maybe if we all clap our hands together, she'll come back to life." Just like in, Peter Pan. And so, of course, they all clapped their hands, and then I got it back to life. And then, like, everyone was all excited because that was before intermission. And, like, I have to say, that was, like, that's something I still look back on with so much pride. Like, I totally improvised with those fucking guys. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
And so I'm like really proud of that. And then like the capper was getting to play Big Bottom with it was like Adrian Ballew's bass player, and everyone in Spinal Tap. So that was my Spinal Tap tale, and it was really fun, and I'm so glad that I did that.
For most people, that would be enough. I mean, forget having a career in music. I mean, for me, I love comedy. I've taken some improv classes, and I love comedy. I love doing improv, and I don't get a chance to do it almost ever. To do that with those guys just one time, and then play bass on Big Bottom with Adrian Ballou and some of his crew. Oh my, that would be enough for most people. And you just kind of took that, and that was the beginning of your career. That's where you started.
Kind of. I mean, I started like more in like the LA sort of, I don't know, it wasn't punk at that point. It was like something that came after punk. But what I have thought before about just the sort of like fearlessness that I had in that whole thing, because I was just so into it, and I just was such a fan, and coming from a place of this is awesome. And I've often thought like, God, I wish I had more of that with my same, my own work or something. You know what I mean? Like I think because it was such a fucking like weird fantasy land of like, just this like what's real, fictional bizarreness, and I don't know, but it's definitely a story I've not told in that detail, I think, to very many people, and it was hilarious, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it.
Well, I'm glad you shared it with me and the listeners here, because that is amazing. That is probably one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. It's so great.
It was pretty classic.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
How did you start with music? So you said you were in music school when all this happened. What brought you to music school?
Well, I had been so the first band I was ever in was called the Love Dolls, and that was an all-girl band that sort of, interestingly enough, came from these small cult films that this guy called Dave Markey had made. Excuse me. And then the band became more real, and that was my first band. And then after that band, I was in a 3-piece, kind of like big star sounding power pop group called the Rails. And yes. I had found what was happening with me a lot is that I would get really frustrated because I'd have all these ideas in my head, and it would take me too long to get the ideas into my fingers.
Okay.
And I would become really frustrated by that. Like it was because I couldn't play as quickly as I could think and stuff. So I had thought, people were quite encouraging of my, playing and stuff, and I had really enjoyed it. And so I just sort of made the decision, I had gone to, I was an anthropology major in college for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
And then just totally bailed on that. The music program at the school I went to wasn't for me. So then I was just kind of like working in a coffee house for a while. And I don't remember how I decided to go to this music school. But I remember being a little intimidated at the time because I definitely have these real defined tastes, and I'm not a big fan of the kind of like super slick Steely Dan, Toto, fucking David Sanborn type stuff. Like,
right.
In fact, I'm anti that morally. So I was concerned about, I didn't want to go to like a rock school because I'm like, I don't think I need to go to school for that,
right.
But my concern about going to a jazz school was like that kind of thing. But one of my friends my friend Deborah Holland, who had been like kind of a buddy of mine she was my piano teacher when I was a kid. She was like, you know what, you have really strong opinions, your personality's pretty well formed. I wouldn't worry about that. I think you're just going to get better at being yourself. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I went to, that's why I went to music school. And then shortly thereafter, I started, trying to make a living as an instrumentalist just because it was like, this is what I wanted to do, and I would like to get paid for it if I could,
Yeah, that's nice. If you can do it, yeah.
Yeah.
So you went from music school to Spinal Tap. Did you get back in time to finish your final exams for music school?
I did, and it was so funny because I remember the head of the bass department was furious with me for like flaking, and he was like, and he was like, I wish I could go do something like that, but no, I'm stuck playing on the Tonight Show every night, and blah 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 blah. So he was like really mad at me, and then one of the other bass instructors, this guy named Tom Warrington, who was like this monster. He used to play with like Buddy Rich. I think he was just totally like the kind of guy that could hear every chord that flew by him and tell you what it was and what inversion it was in. It was just like, yikes, like perfect pitch guy.
Jeez.
He was like, I think that's awesome. That's the way you're going to make it in this industry. And so like I got sort of mixed. And then of course, immediately after I graduated from the Dick Grove School of Music, it went bankrupt. So.
Oh God. Jeez. So your timing basically.
After that one teacher I had, because he the guy that was the head of the bass department, whose book I still use for some of my bass students, Joel DeBartolo, this poor guy, in the same year, his music school teaching job dried up because the school went bankrupt, and then Johnny Carson quit the Tonight Show, or he retired from the Tonight Show. So he like lost both of his jobs like in the same year.
So his timing is awful, and it looks so to me so far like your timing is spot on, just at life in general.
I have no idea about that. That's like something that only an outsider can have perspective on.
Well, from my perspective, I mean, graduating right before the school goes bankrupt, so you didn't waste your money there. Fortunately, being at the right place at the right time for Spinal Tap, you're doing something right back then. That's for sure.
I guess back then, yeah. What happened?
So what did you do after that? What was life like for you after the school closed? What were you doing musically at that point? Oh, and you know, before you answer that, something I've always wanted to ask people who've gone to music school. So you studied bass. What is the final exam for bass? Like, what, are you just playing?
Well, it really depends on the classes. I mean, it was a whole. I didn't just take bass lessons there. I mean, there was like harmony and composing and arranging, and I don't remember, to be honest, any of what the finals were for any of that.
But is it you playing? Is it you playing, or is it you taking like a written test, or is it a little bit of both?
No, I don't remember, honestly, but I'm sure. I mean, we had ensemble stuff where we had to play with like different sections, and then a lot of like harmony. But like that was the most playing, unless I'm like woodshedding for something, that I've ever really done, because I was playing like about 8 or 9 hours a day at that time, you know. But I really can't. I mean, it's not like you just have one class, you know. There was there'd be one class where you'd have to transcribe something every week and bring it in, you know. And then there'd be like a Latin jazz class, and then there'd be an ensemble class, and then there'd be like music theory class, and then you would take the next one, and then there'd be like arranging for quartet, you know, small section, you know, that sort of thing.
So it's kind of like a lot of artistic degrees, artistic majors you would find, where it's kind of a mix of having something to show or taking a test, depending on what class you're in. And that makes sense to me.
I mean, like the harmony class would have been written down, you know. So like the music theory stuff, you would be writing down whatever. I don't remember. I mean, again, this was like in the early 90s, so I just totally don't remember at all.
Okay.
I do. The only other thing I remember about that place is they had this old Yamaha. It was like I think it might have been like even a 215 or an 8x10 combo. It was like a tall combo, but it had a distortion knob on it that I thought was really nice to use during the bass solos during like ensembles. And then after my second sort of quarter there, all of a sudden that amp disappeared.
Well, you know, your friend was right. You definitely already had your fully formed personality and opinions by that point. So
I guess so.
All right. So you went on from there. You've worked with Bangles, the Go-Gos, the Eagles of Death Metal, Masters of Reality, Kfdm.
Yeah, that was way later. That was like, you know, in the 2000s. So I did all that stuff. So
what were you doing between school and playing with these bigger name bands?
So I was in the Rails for a couple more years, and then the first job I ever, tour I ever got was playing bass for Vanessa Paradis in France.
Okay, that's Johnny Depp's ex-wife?
Yeah, so she's kind of like an actress, but also sort of a singer. Okay. And she had made this record with Lenny Kravitz. So they wanted kind of like an all-American band, you know? So that was like my first kind of like going to Europe and doing that. So I did that for a while until I got fired from that job. And then
Is there a story there?
Did some stuff like not really. I think what happened was I had said something like, fuck that, but it was construed as fuck you to her. You know what I mean? Because there's a little bit of an English to French thing, as well as a cultural, like, how women are meant to behave sort of dynamic back then, and I was a little maybe too punk rock for the room. But I did, but, you know, whatever. I got to go to the Seychelles, and I didn't go to the Seychelles. I went to La Réunion and Île Maurice, which were in, like, the Indian Ocean, and and, you know, some of those bass lines were quite fun to play, as I recall, too. Lenny Kravitz, although he's you know where he's sort of, inspired, what he's inspired by, and I use that term liberally. It's stuff that I like, So,
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I played with Michael Penn for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And I had my first solo band called Mommy, which was me and two guys, but that I think we may have made a cassette.
Oh boy.
And then I started playing with Beck, and right after his first, right after Loser came out.
Oh, okay.
So we played on Lollapalooza. And some festivals, and then while I was on doing Lollapalooza with him, now we're like about 1995.
Yeah.
Elastica. First, Sinead O'Connor was on that bill, but then she left, and then they got Elastica, and then Elastica's bass player left, and so then I got the call, and then so I was playing bass with actually both bands.
Oh, wow.
At the end of that, which was really fun. And I actually enjoyed working with Elastica quite a bit, so I kept working with them for a while, like into 1990, into the next year and stuff.
Okay.
But then, and I could have joined that band, and so that's one of those things that sometimes I think back that it might have been fun at that age. Like at that point, I was like 26 years old. Maybe it would have been amazing to have moved to England for a while, like lived in London and been a pop star and stuff.
Right, yeah.
But I was a little concerned with the amount of drug use that was kind of happening, and was thinking like maybe I'll turn into a big junkie if I go move to England. And I also, I think, had really wanted to do my own music, and I thought like here I've just played bass with like two huge bands that were like, are on the, at that point,
really popular,
very big bands, and I thought if there's ever a time for me to try and do this, hi sweetie, I'm doing an interview. I thought if there's ever a time for me to try and do this, now is that time. And I would hate to be an old person, and at that point I thought in my 40s, when you're in your 20s, and so look back and go, wow, I never tried this. So I made that decision to really try and do my own music. And sort of like all since then, I've always kind of had this sort of dual thing where, I work for other people, but I've also put out I put out 4 solo records under my own name. Mm-hmm. And now I have my band Sumo Princess, but at the same time, I've also played with all these other acts to, not only make a living, but to, go on nicer tours and play music hopefully that I like, and I've always been kind of like a little half and half there.
Okay. Now you also ended up playing with Kfdm, and if I'm reading this correctly, you also helped write some of the songs on their Symbols album.
Yeah, I'm on that record. I'm the chick in the nurse outfit on that album. That's
okay. Now, I was looking at the album. I don't know a whole lot about Kfdm because when they were out, I was more into, Soundgarden, Beck, Spinal Tap, stuff like that. So Kfdm wasn't really in my wheelhouse, but I was listening to the album today, and how hard was it for you to go from something like Beck and Elastica to playing in an industrial band like Kfdm, which until recently I always thought still actually stood for Kill Motherfucking Depeche Mode?
I didn't really think it was hard. I mean, I didn't tour with them. I decided not to tour with them.
Okay.
But I enjoyed making that record, and I actually, that was the first time I'd ever worked, Sasha, the main guy from that band, is really good sort of engineer and understands computers. Like he would be the guy that, like, way back in the day at the NAMM show, they'd have him show people how to run Pro Tools, when it was kind of like software and stuff. So it was really fascinating to me to, until then I had only recorded onto, like, 2-inch tape and stuff like that, or 4-track or whatever. So I really enjoyed kind of learning about how to record onto computers from just working on that record for as long as I did. And it's a lot of fun.
Did they come to you after hearing you and saying, hey, we want to write with you? Or was it a case of them just discovering that you had that talent while you were playing with them?
No. How that happened was there was this band called Pigface that Martin Atkins.
I remember them.
Yeah. Okay. So Pigface was kind of like an industrial sort of like super group sort of touring ensemble. And at one point they were looking for a bassist, and my friend Chris Bruce, who's this like phenomenal musician whom I adore, recommended me for that. And so I talked to Martin, and he, I didn't know him, and he sent me like, some of their videos and their music and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to do it. And then he decided to go with someone that they knew who was out of Chicago, where most of those people, were residing at that point. Mm-hmm. But he was like, when we come to LA, why don't you jam with us at the Roxy? And I was like, sure. So when they came to LA, I played with, like, I just jammed with them on the encore at their show. And so that's kind of how I met a lot of those, some of those industrial guys like William Tucker and Chris Connolly and Martin Atkins and Anesh, who's the tall. It's funny because I am when I first saw the sort of the pictures and everything of Pigface, and there's this giant man who's like, very Teutonic, who's bald and wears a black leather trench coat and 24-hole Doc Martens, and I'm like, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm gonna get along with that guy. He looks very, little sketch. But then when I met him, he also had, in addition to what I just described, like 4-foot-long pearls and a bunch of eye makeup on, and I was like, okay, now I love this guy. He's not like a scary skinhead guy. He's awesome. So I became friends with him. And he was the person, I guess KMFDM always would have like they'd have a different female singer until they got a solid lineup with Lucia, who came, I think, like maybe 1 or 2 records after I did. And so she's been the singer ever since then. But until that time, they had a bunch of different female voices. So Anesh got me involved. So because I could play bass and sing and write, and that's how that happened.
Okay. And so how did you go from KMFDM to the Bangles? That's a big shift in sound.
Well, the Bangles was like that. KMFDM was in 1998, and the Bangles were in like 2005 or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, the Bangles was just one of those things where they needed a bass player. I had met the Peterson sisters. Because they were friends with the Red Cross guys.
Right. Okay.
And so Red Cross was very much a part of like my early musical kind of upbringing in Los Angeles, because they had actually played the songs on the Love Dolls soundtrack. So some of the first bass lines I ever learned were actually played by Steve McDonald, the bassist of Red Cross. I kind of learned to play bass by playing his bass lines. Right. So I that's kind of part of a scene that I was involved with, like more, in my teens and stuff, but I've known those guys forever. And then also Vicky was in this band called the Continental Drifters, which was sort of this like kind of New Orleans-y. It was kind of modeled after the band, so it was very loose in a good way. Right. It was like her and Peter Holzapfel and this really great drummer called Carlo Nuccio that lives in New Orleans or whatever. So I just knew her sort of over the years. And so when they were looking for a new bassist. I auditioned and got the job. That's kind of how that happened.
Okay, so you've played with the Bangles and the Go-Gos throughout the years, and in between all that, you've been doing your own solo work. And your first album it came out in '97, right? The Abby Travis Foundation.
Okay, you're better at years than me. I've been doing pretty well with years.
You've been doing great. You've been doing great with them. In fact, because I've got my notes up and you're hitting them spot on from what I've got. So unless my sources, which are usually Wikipedia and your website. So who played on the Abby Travis Foundation? Because it's got some great songs. Like I love Crazy in Love, and the intro to Dust. It's fantastic.
Boy, man, I have no idea. I'd have to go look at the liner notes too. I think that I know that. Jesus, I have no idea who played on that album. I honestly, I think Vic and Drizzo played on a song. And I think Jerry Finelli for sure. I'm sure played some keyboards on it. I think Brian Kaye, who had been in Mommy, played some guitar on it, maybe.
Okay.
I think that I really don't remember. I'm so sorry. I'm guessing.
God, no problem. Don't worry about any of that.
Oh, the intro to Dust, though, I really like. I remember being kind of proud of that. It was my sort of like chordal,
yeah,
that's that. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Forgot about that song.
Yeah. Well, you put out 4 solo albums. Your second was Cutthroat Standards and Black Pop. Glittermouth came out in 2006, and your fourth album, which is called 4. That one, when I was looking up information on you, I found a promo video that you did for Kickstarter. That was hilarious.
Thank you.
I love that. That was fantastic. And my questions, I guess, about the album are basically: do you have any Spinal Tap picks left, and did you sell any of your bras?
Someone actually paid enough money, and I have an idea of who it is, but who's a nice guy that works in the record industry, to get the bras, but he sent a thing saying, "Don't want the bras." Just here's $500 or whatever that premium was, Yeah. And then, yes, the pics I got just weirdly. My friend Pleasant, I don't know, one of my friends, and I think it was Pleasant, had this like big yard sale. And she just happened to have all these Spinal Tap guitar picks.
Oh, my gosh.
She just gave them to me for historical reasons. But yeah, I actually use them when I'm playing guitar because I have kind of a half pint Tupperware thing filled with picks. So yeah.
Oh man. So when I come out, and the other thing is, one of the things you offered was a ride to or from LAX. So I've got a couple.
No one took me up on that.
Are you kidding?
Believe it?
Because I've got a couple friends in LA that want me to come out and visit. So I was thinking, I know the promotion is over, but maybe if I pay you, maybe I can get you to come pick me up at LAX.
Maybe, or you could just take an Uber.
Well, that's true. But it wouldn't be as cool as having Abby Travis drop me off at my buddy's house. So
well, that's possible. It depends on where your friend lives. It's possible.
That's so.
No, because that you have to remember that sort of Kickstarter thing was a little bit before rideshare stuff became so prevalent. You know. So back then, getting a ride to or from the airport was something that was very valuable.
Valuable enough to put on your Kickstarter campaign for sure. And
my favorite shot in that video, I thought that my neighbor and I made that video just like he was like filming it on my iPad or something. And I love the shot where my husband, because I was like, okay, if I'm selling bras, that could get pretty creepy and be weird. So we decided to put my husband's fist, and he's got those like Popeye arms.
Yes.
But I just thought it worked out so well because my feint, to the side, it was so right in the frame. I got a kick out of that.
Yeah, it was enormous forearm comes
Like, he has like a total Popeye. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Well, the one thing that I loved about that is that it showed your sense of humor, and in your music, your solo music, definitely, even though it's not like funny, except for songs like the Hate song, which
the Hate song's totally funny. Yeah, for sure.
You're an unswattable fly. You make me puke. Pretend you're my friend and you shoot up like a rocket made of wax. I know the best revenge is happiness and some success.